Okay, so I mentioned before about thinking of it as a play. You're think of yourself as the playwright, the director, and the actor in these. That's generally how do you want this thing to unfold. Now, it's not always going to unfold the way you want, but it's good to have an idea, to get organized and have an idea on how you're going to structure, or how you're going to, who's going to play what role, and what's going to be said when, or what you're going to need when. If you can do that. Now, there are a lot of questions, there are a lot of open issues, there are a lot of things you don't know that you're going to try to find out. But if you can think of it as that, you think of it this way, as something that does need to be organized, it doesn't necessarily have to be linear, but that more importantly, that you're going to have to think about what you're going to say and when, you will A, be much more confident, B, you will be better prepared, and C, you'll get a much better deal. So I say here, prepare, even script your the difficult requests that you have to make and the responses that you expect that you're going to have to give to difficult questions. That also, incidentally, means that if you are, and this, I'm jumping ahead a little bit in terms of the actual flow of the conversation, is that if you are given if you receive a very difficult question during a conversation or during a negotiation, don't feel like you have to answer it right then and there. It's perfectly okay to say, I'm going to have to get back to you on that point, and that will give you time to research, prepare your answer, and script what you're going to say. And then I say, then rehearse and run them by your team. And I am not kidding when I say rehearse. One of my favorite things to do when I'm driving to meetings is to turn the radio off and actually to prepare what I'm going to say, or to prepare responses to particular points that I know are going to come up, or to prepare questions that I know that I'm not that comfortable asking, or that I know are difficult hot spots or difficult points. So when I say rehearse, I really mean it. The other thing that I do, I came in on the tail end of the one of the programs this morning on that was over in the other building, and it was a lot about one of the themes of the program was about fitness and about making time for yourself. And I am the queen of multitasking while walking. What I do when I walk, apart from sometimes I do creative things that are fun that don't have anything to do with work in my own mind while I'm walking, but I also spend a lot of time while I'm walking spinning out the negotiations that I'm going to be doing, or thinking about what I'm going to be saying, or actually trying to think about allowing that side of the right side of your brain, I think it's the right side that is the one that's kind of figuring things out intuitively, to allow it to help me problem solve on the things that are really bothering me about a negotiation. So I work through a lot of the things that what is it that I don't really like about what's happening in this deal, or what am I most concerned about in this deal, or what has my client asked me to say, what point has my client asked me to push for that I personally don't feel comfortable pushing for, and what am I going to do about it? How am I going to say it? And seriously, if you think about the different ways that you can say something or ask something, or even just walk through your own brain the conversation of how am I going to convince myself, because obviously I have to be convinced myself before I convince them, it's incredibly helpful. So here's another little tip here. This is probably one of the most important things. Actually, there's nothing else that you take from this. It is not to be afraid to ask for what you really want. And this really is a gender issue. In my own experience, I have found that women tend to sell themselves short, or they tend not to ask for what they really want, because they don't like confrontation, they don't like rejection, they don't like people to say no, they don't like people to say, what, are you kidding? However, ask for what you really want. I'll talk a little bit about opening offers in a minute, but if you start too low, you can be sure that you are not going to get what you really, really want. So when I actually opening offers here, should you or shouldn't you? Yes, you always should. And yes, you should always start high. And even if you feel that you do not have a prayer of getting some particular point on your deal for whatever reason because you've never seen it given before, don't let that stop you. I learned this about 2 or 3 times a year when I have a client. Oftentimes, my clients rely on me to basically go back and ask for points because at a certain point, at a certain part of the process, I'm the one who's driving the deal. And a lot of times I'll tell them, you are kidding. I would never agree to that. But you would be surprised. I am surprised several times a year when I ask for something, and then for a variety of reasons, who knows why, sometimes I know why, and sometimes I don't, I actually get the point that if you'd asked me what my probability of getting that point were, I would say it's about, I don't know, 1 in 100 for a variety of reasons. I mean, and so this is a lesson actually that I've learned from my clients, and also because they've told me, and told me to do it. I've gone back and forth with them. A lot of times I'll go back and forth with them and have the dialogue. Well, why should we? I've never seen that done before. They push, we ask, and we get it. A lot of times, though, that process of figuring out why is this point difficult, again, allows you to examine, well, what are the arguments for it? Why? Because you have to be able to justify it, obviously. Ask for what you want. The worst that can happen is that they'll say no. And also this other point here, don't fear rejection or confrontation. Do not fear rejection or confrontation. Do not. As I said, the worst thing that can happen is that they'll say no. And usually, if you don't agree, I'll talk to you a little bit about how, again, there are whole books written on this, but a lot of times, if there is a no, there are a lot of ways to try to work through the no and figure out how to find middle ground. Okay. So just to summarize on why you want, why I suggest, a lot of people say, well, what do you think about opening offers? Should I make the opening offer? I always say yes. Always, always, always yes. The only reason for not making the opening offer is you feel like you don't have enough information. And if you don't have enough information, then you shouldn't actually be starting the negotiation anyway. I say yes, always, always make the opening offer if you can, because opening offers set expectations. Okay, and yes, it may be high, but if you believe that that the value is there, if you can justify it, if you can make a plausible argument for why you should get what it is that you want, the chances are much more likely that you will. Also, again, all these things that I've said about thinking through what is my response going to be if you prepare effectively, you increase your confidence, and confidence is half the game. Actually, it's more than half the game, as I'm sure you know, with respect to areas other than simply just negotiating. So now I'm going to talk very specifically about the thing that most people really, really don't like about negotiating, and that's the whole no problem. I heard somewhere, I don't know if this, I'm not sure if this is proven, but, and I don't even remember the source of this, but someone once said that on the scale of, where going to a really fabulous, beautiful resort spa and having a massage is like towards the top of the list, and having a root canal is towards the bottom of the list, and negotiating is actually below root canal. So I've heard that most people would prefer to have a root canal than to have to manage a negotiation. And the reason that most people don't like it is that they don't like no, and they don't like confrontation, they don't like rejection, and they don't like disagreement. And every negotiation is really just a series of little hurdles that involve lack of agreement, but there's nothing wrong with that. Your job is to figure out the solution, and there are a lot of ways to do that. Yeah.
I think just adding to that, why we don't like it is because it's so personal. Yeah. Even when it is business,
yes.
That's
exactly right.
Whatever number that is, that's my personal value.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And the other thing is the anticipation of the no.
Exactly. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about preparing for the no. Okay. So if you don't like to say, there are a lot of people who don't like to say no. And actually, I'll give you something. The people who are, in a lot of ways, the best deal makers, they're the people who want to get things done. They're the ones who are creating something. They are the positive, optimistic, we can do anything, we're going to have the great, we can provide the greatest solution for you, you're going to be so happy. It's a certain it's a certain personality, or actually most of us have it, but that whole business about having to say no, that really makes people uncomfortable. So how can you say no where you don't actually say no? And I'm giving you a couple, like, this is a script, okay? So figure out and rehearse, and actually just say these 7 times to yourself while you're driving to work or driving to the meeting or whatever. I doubt that we can make that work, okay? I doubt, that's another way of saying no, but it's also much less confrontational, and you don't actually use the big N word, right? Or if somebody presents a completely outrageous, usually it's numbers that are either too low or too high, or otherwise are making demands that are just completely out of left field, you can say kindly, "You're kidding, right? You're kidding. You can't possibly mean that," okay? That's a nice way of saying no. That's a nice way of saying no, right? Or, but again, it's keeping the door open to communicate that that's not working for us. At the same time, you're not walking out, and you're not also, it's not an affront, and it's not saying no, you're not saying no. So a lot of times you can ask a question in response. That helps as well. And again, asking questions is such a great negotiating tactic, such a great negotiating skill, because A, you get more information, and B, that's how you solve problems. You can't solve any problem without asking questions, without understanding better, okay? Now, people are not going to want, a lot of times you will want transparency, and you are going to want to try to protect your own side from revealing too much, but asking questions, where did that come from? Why is that reasonable? Why should we agree to that? Or, those are all questions that you can ask that elicit more information, and the more information that you have, the closer you are to moving the process along. And then, remember, it's not just what you say, but it is how you say it. And this is not only for the no's, but it's also for certain other things. It's also for your asks. I'll talk a little bit about the tone of voice and that kind of thing. So just think about this. When you are thinking about your negotiation and you ask yourself, what is it? What is it that makes me not feel good about this? I mean, feeling good, yeah, that's basically what it boils down to. What am I uncomfortable about? What am I afraid of? What do I feel like I'm going to have to deal with? And then think about it and literally rehearse ways that you can get over that so that you keep the momentum, so that you maintain the positive sort of flow of the or attitude or tone of the relationship. So here's about dealing with pushback. This is kind of the flip side of this. So if somebody is giving you pushback, oh, absolutely, we can't do that. Or we need to have X, Y, and Z, very, very, very non-standard term, one that you never agreed to, one that is, you know you're not going to be able to get approval for, that kind of thing.